All right, everyone. Welcome to tonight's edition of Elections Weekly. As usual, I'm your host, Eric Cunningham. We have the full panel again this week: Joe Szymanski, Kraz Granitz, and Dylan Brown. It's been an interesting few days. There's been some conflicting political stuff going on. There's been some big stuff going on. There's been some not so big stuff going on. But we're going to bring it all to you this week. I'm going to go ahead though and start with Joe. I'm going to throw it to Joe. We had some primaries Tuesday. Let's kind of go over those primaries and get the ball rolling on that before we move into anything else.
So Tuesday we had primaries in 5 states and then runoffs in 2 others. The big one being Mississippi, of course, having their 2 big GOP runoffs in the 3rd and 4th district. Mm-hmm. The story of the night was really, I think the fact was that it wasn't necessarily a whole lot of surprises, but there were a good chunk of incumbent defeats, though. In the House, actually 3 incumbents on the night lost alone. 2 of those were because of incumbent versus incumbent redistricting primaries in Illinois in the 6th district, thanks to, as we would say here, South American level dictatorship margins in DuPage County for Sean Casten. I think he won DuPage like almost 90-10 in the final results. He beat Marie Newman pretty handily for the Democratic nomination in the new 6th congressional district. Well, downstate in the 15th. Thanks to basically running up the numbers everywhere that wasn't a major population area around a big city in the new 15th district. Mary Miller beat Ronnie Davis by about 14 and a half points in the 15th district in that Republican primary. Miller is supremely heavily favored in that very much a Republican sink district down safe. We have the 6th district rated as lean Democratic right now in Illinois. That's one, though, that could change. It's hard to maybe see. Casten was a significantly better candidate than Newman. We had changed it because of kind of the primary uncertainty there. With Casten now as a nominee, he's a bit more of a moderate candidate, might fit those DuPage Compound County parts a little better. We could see potentially a move back to likely in our next ratings update.
Yep. And let's go a little bit more about that Miller-Davis primary. Obviously, both of them are incumbents here. Mary Miller, freshman incumbent, and then Rodney Davis, the more moderate person. More like typically what you've seen in some of these downstate Illinois representatives. Like in particular, the transit guy's his name is completely escaping my mind. Obama's transit secretary. Yeah, Ray LaHood. Ray LaHood and his son. Yeah, the LaHoods represented more moderate wing. Rodney Davis as well. Democrats redrew downstate substantially to give themselves an additional. They decided to get rid of these stupid, let's split St. Louis in half and try to win 2 seats, and to replace that with let's just draw a single vote sink from St. Louis to Champaign. And so the 2 of them are thrown together. What do we look at the margins there? I know we kind of got off, I believe it was about 10 points. Not a horrible performance from Davis, but certainly, this is a very conservative district downstate. They clearly leaned a little bit more towards the Trump endorsement, towards that more conservative candidate in Mary Miller, even with, the controversial remarks and whatnot.
Yeah, so the big problem for Davis in the end was while he usually did significantly better in some of the bigger areas, especially around his old district. You look at Sangamon, around Springfield, Macon County, which was, again, that's another one that was around his old district, Christian County. He won the part of Champaign County, not by a large margin, but he won it. And he also won some of the counties around, even though they were smaller, from the counties around his old district. But really the big loss were in Madison and Adams County. These 2 counties had the most votes. Miller losing Madison is what made the call happen for Miller, because that part of the county, that was more part of Davis's the old long streak of that cutoff of St. Louis you talked about. That obviously that's no longer there, so we kind of have that cut. The fact that he lost that 60-40, that was when it was called. And then Adams County, which is this very Republican county on the western side of the state, it went for Miller by a 79-21 margin, and it cast over, I believe, over 11, just over 11,000 votes in the district, cast the most votes. It should be said that almost just over 111,000 Republicans casted votes in this primary alone. That's humongous turnout for primary, to be sure, especially in Illinois. And as one of our commenters points out, Trump did hold his rally in Adams. It paid off for sure in dividends there. Those are really the two counties that really drove Miller to victory. Before Adams and Madison came in, it was a much closer race. Once we had Madison and Adams come in, though, at those margins, that was really it for Davis, and that's what really hurt him in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and this is about what we expect. Again, downstate is extremely Republican. It's only getting more Republican, and it's getting more aggressively conservative. Worth noting, I think we have that new 13th district. We have that in leans or likely Democratic. One of the
leans. We have it as leans currently.
Yep. Again, in an off year, Illinois is not a great state for Democrats. They tend to lose some statewide races in these Democratic years. We don't expect that to happen this year. Because Republicans utterly messed up the gubernatorial nomination here. They nominated a more conservative candidate than the state would be typically inclined to elect. But there's a reasonable possibility that Democrats don't have any seats downstate this cycle, because we do have that seat in the leans, and we have the 17th district, I believe, if that remains the numbering, the more competitive one that's the retiring Cheri Bustos is retiring from. Let's go ahead, though, and I believe
Cheri Bustos.
Oh, what?
Never thought I'd say that I missed Cheri Bustos.
Yeah, and it's the same Republican nominee this time, Esther Joy King, who almost unseated Cheri Bustos last cycle in a Democratic.
Oh no, I just mean because she protected us all from Sean Patrick Maloney.
Oh yeah, that's a completely fair point. That's a very fair point. So let's look at some of these other states we had on Tuesday as well. Mississippi's the big one, right? We had those two Mississippi primaries. Let's go over those real quick. And then we'll go into, I guess, Colorado, because Colorado had some interesting results. I think Kras can talk a little bit more about some crossover voting and just the general oddity of Democrats supporting three far-right candidates and all of them losing.
Yeah. So in Mississippi, there were two primaries in the more southern-based Mississippi seats, the 3rd district and the 4th district. Obviously, I'll talk about the 3rd district first. That was a really surprising one from a couple weeks ago, earlier in June. That was when incumbent Congressman Michael Guest, who voted for the January 6th committee, he was surprisingly held to a runoff by Michael Cassidy, who was just this, literally, as I think Kras said on the stream that night, just literally the obfuscation of just some dude who turned out to get a bunch of votes in the primary because a bunch of people were angry and weren't paying attention. And when people paid attention, it was like Republicans were like, this guy has some really out there ideas. Some of them, one of them includes putting a 5-year moratorium on immigration and then replacing all the immigration workers on farms with prison labor in Mississippi.
Also investigating Netflix for child trafficking.
Yes.
Don't forget as well the Medicare for all.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, don't forget the Medicare for all, the $20,000 to every married couple. We're not sure if it's straight. We're not sure if
the $20,000 to every new married couple would have certainly not been abused.
Okay,
and again, we're not sure.
Yeah,
we're not sure if this applies to straight and gay couples. Given the rest of us, we're pretty leaning towards.
Yes, we are. But the real question is, does it apply to interracial couples?
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
But no, Cassidy.
But anyways, as I'm sure Eric was going to say there, Cassidy got, I think, and again, this is something that I think Kras said on Tuesday night. I don't think we've ever seen anyone who was an outsider candidate who forced someone to a runoff get absolutely smacked back down in the second round like Michael Cassidy was on Tuesday night. He lost 67-33. To Michael Guest. I think, if I go back here to look at some of the county results from the June 7th first round that we had there. If I go back and I look at the numbers there.
And we really should emphasize just how far out he's literally moved to Mississippi last year. He's not been in Mississippi for that much longer than a year. He's literally a random guy off the street that got 48, that almost became a congressman. This is like the weirdest one since Kenny Bentivolio, probably from Michigan, winning a congressional campaign.
No,
it should be.
He is genuinely psychotic.
Yeah. Oh,
he's dangerous.
And it should be said that only 48,000 people turn out for the first round. We had 69,000 people turn out in the second round in the runoff race. If you look at the first round map, you see Cassidy won a lot more of these kind of like outer, closer to the Gulf, closer to Alabama, closer to the Gulf Bay area counties. I'm talking about counties like Jasper, Newton, Clark, Lauderdale, Walthall, Pike, Marion counties. And then other than Lauderdale and that one little part of Jones County, Cassidy flipped back all of them, some of them by pretty impressive margins. He ended up winning Walthall and Pike, which he lost by 24 and 14 point diff gap respectively. Guest did on June 7th. He won by 30 points in both of them.
We were very close to having an absolute meme in Congress.
Well, no, that's the funny thing. Yeah, it's
thank the Lord for Thomas Griffin.
It's like look at it this way. So clearly, voters were upset with Michael Guest's January 6th commission vote. However, I think this is a pretty clear warning sign, at least to some of the more populist wings of the Republican Party, that this sort of stuff is genuinely unpopular in a republic. Like, the reason this guy got to 33% is not because he's a psychotic nutcase. It's because he supported a bunch of massive expansions of the federal government. And no immigration policy or anything along that line was going to be enough to make Republican voters think Medicare for all and massive new tax credits and child tax credits and married tax credits and all this stuff. That's just not enough. It's not enough to overcome all that. This is exclusive to what Guest ran on. Was this $48 trillion social spending plan is what it was called, and it worked. It clearly worked very well.
Yeah, I think the lesson here, I'll take a little bit of a different tack. The lesson here is you can't be that populist in a Republican primary. You can't propose more spending than most of the liberal Democrats.
Mm-hmm. All of them. Say what you will about Joe Biden's plan. It's not $48 trillion over 10 years, I don't think.
No, Joe Biden's plan is very reasonable.
I don't think it's reasonable, but it's certainly less than $48 trillion.
Well, I think when you compare it to $48 trillion versus the $3 trillion, that Build Back Better was. I think it's pretty easy to say which one is more reasonable. Whether you think even the $3 trillion is reasonable in the first place, which I know me and Eric, neither of us believe that. But moving on, though, to the 4th district, this was one that we did expect. Stephen Palazzo is a congressman who had been pretty heavy under fire the last couple of years, ethics scandals and just inter-district problems. Palazzo was a guy who was routinely attacked for kind of abusing the shadow vote, proxy vote system in Congress post-COVID. He hadn't shown up to work quite a good bit. He was one of the heaviest Republican users of the proxy vote method. He went up against Jackson County Sheriff Mike Gazelle in the runoff, and Palazzo lost basically 54-46. He lost by about 4,200 votes, and that was almost the exact margin in Jackson County, actually. Was almost about 4,200 votes on the nose. So Gazelle's big win in Jackson County was what drove him over Palazzo, basically, because it was basically even throughout the rest of the district. But that was one that was less surprising. We expected that going to the night, and Palazzo was the third incumbent of the night to lose. Which and there's still more to come technically because there's still 2 member v. member primaries left. We have Haley Stevens versus Adam Levin in
Mike Levin.
Mike Levin.
Andy Levin.
Andy Levin.
Okay.
All of the Levins. We're just confusing all the Levins.
There are too many Levins in Michigan, but Andy Levin.
I swear it's Levine.
No, that's the Maroon 5 singer.
It is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll get there.
And we
I even like Andy Levin.
Yeah, Andy Levin versus Haley Stevens in the New Michigan's, I believe that's the new 11th district. And then we have in New York, the always fun, the always spectacular, what's going to be very fun, very spectacular, East Side versus West Side Democratic primary matchup between Carolyn Maloney and Jerry
Yeah.
Nadler. Which
We'll find out
over,
which-
which
yeah,
over
which-
75 geriatric will rich Manhattaners choose? Boy, oh boy, are we excited to
Yeah,
find
are
out.
they going to choose the liberal from the Upper East Side or the liberal from the Upper West Side? The world
A
may never
showdown,
know.
a showdown between two different groups of rich white voters in Manhattan. Truly a titanic matchup.
A showdown between a semi-crazy Democrat and an Islamophobic, probably racist, anti-vax Democrat.
I forgot about that.
I'm
forgot
actually
the anti-vax
surprised
stuff.
it hasn't gotten more play, given how like popular like vaccines, how much an article of faith like vaccines became in the Democratic Party over
I
the last couple of
know.
years.
Look, you're
Because, like,
expecting a Democratic incumbent to be targeted on vaccines. It's never going to happen. This is
Jerry
back when the Republicans were the ones sounding the alarm and all the vaccine stupidity among the white liberals. No one cared. No one
Kraz.
cares now.
Kraz, do you know what Jerry Nadler's campaigning on?
what's he campaigning on?
Apparently, he's putting out whispers that Carolyn Maloney likes pandas too much.
I heard about the panda.
Well, I just think it's funny because during I remember during a hearing back in like 2012, she asked a witness, she was like, what about like these kids who get the vaccines and they come down with autism, you know, like what about them? Like, do we know
Oh
anything about-
no!
Like, first off, the whole like vaccines called autism, but also like come down with autism. Like
It's not the cold.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
the cold.
Yeah,
Carol.
sadly, I've come down with autism for the last 27 years. So, you know, when will it end? We never know.
So she's like pretty. I'm actually surprised she hasn't gotten more like flack for that, given like being an anti-vaxxer was like actually like being like the worst thing ever for the last 2 years.
Like anti-COVID vaccine, no, you can never be an anti-COVID vaccine Democrat. Anti-regular vaccine Democrat, that's mainstream with white liberals. That's like with like healing crystals and chakras and.
Well, I remember someone pointed this out. It was actually kind of funny that pre-COVID, like some really like white hippie areas around like Marin and like the Bay Area and stuff had some of the lowest vaccine rates for like children under like 10 or whatever. Like they'd have some of the lowest. And now post-COVID, they have the highest, and all the working class areas that used to have like really high vaccine rates because like they would just go whatever, like now have the lowest vaccine rates because they all don't like the COVID vaccine, which is like, it's very funny that it just completely reversed.
Yeah. The polarization of medicine.
Yeah. The American electorate.
And Kraz, I ask you, you really expect a Democratic incumbent to campaign?
especially considering that both two over 75-year-old geriatrics. I mean,
that would involve trying.
Which geriatric must you choose? Do you choose the old white lady geriatric, or the old white but Jewish male geriatric?
You know, I would be if the third place guy weren't also terrible, I would be inclined to say support the third guy, but he's made some creepy comments about underage models. So great.
What the hell is this race?
It's an awesome primary field.
Yeah.
What the hell?
But before we get too caught up in New York, though, I do want to close off at least discussing the rest of these races. Oklahoma will just run through real quick. Markwayne Mullin, T.W. Shannon are going to the runoff in the Senate. Possibly illegal, probably illegal Senate primary in Oklahoma, as Kraz will argue. Either one of them would be the first Native American elected to the Senate since 2005. First Native American in the Senate since 2005. And only the second elected in Oklahoma's history. The last one was in 1925. So nearly 100 years. In the other one, James Lankford easily and unexpectedly won his primary by a resounding margin against far-right Gadfly. Against the far-right Gadfly candidate who many on Twitter were convinced would hold Lankford to a runoff somehow. That was not even close to happening. The second district, a bunch of candidates we know nothing about, got around 10 to 15% of the vote. Two of them have been to like 15 and 13%. Avery Fricks.
14.7% and 13.8%. That gets you to a runoff in Oklahoma.
Yeah, beautiful. American elections right there. Gotta love it.
The second place guy doesn't even have a campaign website, or at least he didn't. I looked the other night.
That is an election that would have benefited from some ranked choice voting.
I don't know if it would have, because clearly they didn't know who any of these people were.
Yeah, but it would have forced them to make a choice.
Fair enough.
The worst thing, I think the funniest thing is that even the last place guy almost got 1% of the vote. which like you never see in these primaries. But even the dude who finished all the way at the bottom of these, like, what is it, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15 candidates, he almost finished with 1%.
Yep.
Right.
And we'll go to Utah as well. Utah, there were no surprises in Utah. All the incumbents won their primaries easily. Interestingly, Blake Moore faced the closest challenge. He got 58% of the vote in his primary. Burgess Owens in the 4th district got only 62% of the vote in his primary. You can speculate as to the reason why he would have gotten the small percentage. Mike Lee was held to, I think, about 62% of the vote in his primary. No, that does not mean we're moving the race from safe Republican to leans likely Republican. We're not falling in the Evan McMullin trap. I'm sorry, that's not happening. That's never happening. As long as I'm running elections daily until things change demonstrably.
Even if Evan McMullin wins, we're keeping it safe, Mike Lee.
Yeah. To be clear, yes, he could win. He could win he could win the election and we'll still have it as safe likely. Definitely. Yeah. We're not falling into that trap. We will deny reality before we acknowledge it.
We'll become election deniers for Evan McMullin. Stop the steal.
And we'll go to Colorado real quick as well again. Colorado, Republicans basically had every candidate that they wanted to win their primary win.
Hooray!
Heidi Ganahl, the moderate, won in the gubernatorial primary, moderate Heidi Ganahl won her primary by about 8 percentage points over Greg Lopez, who was backed by Democrats as a far right sort of person to try and make the state uncompetitive, even though it's literally Colorado.
It's not
in the Senate. In the Senate race, Joe O'Dea, who is a moderate, he's said he'd be the Republican Joe Manchin if elected, won his primary by about 9% over Ron Hanks, a far-right candidate who Democrats were supporting because they didn't want the race to be competitive.
He also said Trump won Colorado in 2020.
Yep. And in the 8th district, Barbara Kirkmeyer won her primary with 39% of the vote, moderate candidate from Weld County. Democratic-backed extremist Lori Sain only got 21% of the vote. That's 3rd place. So Democrats went 0 for 3 in their delusional nutcase backing.
Lori Sain also said that Trump won Colorado in 2020.
Yep. She also said that. Yep. Lauren Boebert easily held back a primary challenge, and Doug Lamborn only got 47% of the vote. We'll presume that the Doug Lamborn decreasing vote share just continues, and eventually he gets removed because it's kind of a consistent trend at this point. But no Republican's been able to consolidate his support. But I want to go back to
it's the same thing that's happened to Lamborn like 3 times.
Yep.
Like in his first election in 2008, and now if like all the anti-Lamborn people just like consolidated into one candidate, he probably would have been gone by this point.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're telling me is eventually this is going to be the equivalent of Oklahoma's 2nd, where Lamborn wins with like 12% of the vote.
Mm-hmm. God, pretty much, yeah. But I do want to go to Colorado 3rd because this is really interesting, and I'm going to let Kraz explain this further. Colorado Republicans outvoted Colorado Democrats. They outvoted them heavily, particularly in the 3rd district. In particular, and we'll let you speculate before we'll just let the suspense build here. San Miguel County. This is a Biden plus 54 county in the presidential election. Republicans have not won this county since 1984. In 2020, Republicans got a grand total of 1,136 votes in the presidential election. In the Republican primary, Republicans had 1,184 votes for the 3rd district congressional race. They improved their turnout from literally more than they got in the 2020 election. Is this proof of the impending red wave about to break through and just turn all these Democratic strongholds red?
No, this is
Kraz can explain why.
No, this is proof that Republicans rigged the vote.
Obviously. This is incredibly funny. This is incredibly funny.
Theory.
This is incredibly
to appreciate. San Miguel County has Telluride, which is like some listeners probably know what Telluride is, but like it's the most absurdly liberal ski town like in America probably, and it's like the amount of money there is like absolutely absurd. It's like Oprah has a house there. It's like where you go if you made like tens of millions of dollars from like defending oil companies in court but feel really bad about it, and so like that's where you have your second home, and so
literally crying with money.
Yeah, crying with money. So, Telluride is just like a wild place, and basically, I'm gonna read some numbers for the listeners. So in the 2018 primary, 2018 gubernatorial primary, Democrats outvoted Republicans in San Miguel County 83-17. In the 2018 general election, Jared Polis won the county 75-23. In the 2020 general election, it actually got bluer, and Biden won the county 76-22. And in the 2022 primary, so on Tuesday, the GOP outvoted Democrats in the congressional primary 60-40. That's only a mild, let me do the math here, 66. That's only a mild 86 percentage point swing from 2018. So, yeah, that's pretty insane. And actually, if you look, I mean, I think we, in our roundup that Eric wrote, we had the DDHQ map maybe, but Boebert lost all the major ski towns with lots of liberals because they all registered to vote in the GOP primary against her, and she won everywhere else like 80-20.
I want to point out, here's where maybe this switch could have affected the Democratic nominee for Colorado's third, because everyone thought it was going to be Sol Sandoval, who's, I think, a Democratic state representative from the more Hispanic parts of the district area near Pueblo. So she lost by like just barely over 600 votes. So you think, and she lost San Miguel County. She did pretty well, and she only lost by about 32 votes.
Oh,
and
my God.
She did pretty well in some of these ski.
That's
Gunnison and Garfield, where there was higher, like seemingly higher than normal anti-Boebert turnout. She didn't do all that poorly in, and you can imagine that if maybe those Democratic voters had kept their registration and not voted to try and kick out Lauren Boebert in what was truly and not really all that plausible item, that maybe Democrats would not have gotten the boring white guy, and instead it would have gotten slightly more exciting Hispanic lady from the important parts of the district that you really need to turn out in a midterm to even have a shot in a Trump +8 seat. So, in conclusion, Democrats trying to vote out Lauren Boebert in a primary instead of the general election may have cost probably those individuals more favored general election candidate her primary.
Which is funny because it's like all those people who did that, like they all have two homes. So like I don't even know what their beef is, being like they don't even really represented by Boebert. They all like have
they could leave.
They all actually live in like, San Francisco. So but yeah, no, so that's funny.
And we do want to get to our last race of the night, which is interesting and unusual. We're going to go over it here real quick. So, or not real quick, because I think we'll have a little bit of a discussion on this. But the dialogue on Twitter about this race has been not great. Let's just put it that way. There's been a lot of hopium, I would call it, from Democrats about in the wake of this Nebraska race. I think there are other factors that can more adequately explain what happened than the red wave being erased by Dobbs. But basically, in the first district special election in Nebraska, Mike Flood only beat the Democratic candidate there, Patty Pansing Brooks, by about 6 percentage points. This is a Trump +11 district. That's not very good. That's a pretty bad underperformance as far as special elections go. Some on Twitter have taken this to mean that any talk of Republicans winning is done. It's over. Dobbs has invigorated Democrats. They're going to win everything now. They're just going to sweep all the races and overcome a massive 150-year historical political trend because of one Supreme Court decision in July or June, actually. So what are our other reasons here that this could be that this could have happened? Did Dobbs play a role? What does this mean? Is this a big deal? I think there's some warning signs here, but I don't think this is really I think there's one other factor here in particular that explains quite a good amount of why this race was a little bit closer than it said. Man, this race is definitely illegal, by the way. This race is absolutely 100% illegal.
It is so illegal.
So illegal.
This is such a
really blatant.
So illegal.
Let's explain that first. So basically, Nebraska drew, like every other state in the country, drew new congressional lines. Unlike every other state in the country, the dumbasses in charge of Nebraska instituted their congressional map effective immediately, which means the election for Congress for this first district is happening under the new lines, not the old lines. This means that some people in Nebraska will have 2 elected representatives, while others will have 0. To be clear, this is illegal. This is extremely illegal. There's no scenario where this is legal.
Extremely illegal thing to do.
This is very bad. I think some people have said that while he was elected under the new lines, he'll continue to represent the old people. That's not how this works at all.
I thought of this trick. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, no one thought of this trick. You're telling me that what states could do is they could just enact new congressional districts every time there's a special election to make sure that their preferred party wins, and then go to the regular congressional districts in the fall. Like, are you really telling me that, like, if I'm trying to think of who won in the special election, but like, if, Marjorie Taylor Greene was in a special election, Georgia couldn't just redraw her district effective immediately to be downtown Atlanta to kick her out and then set it back for the regular. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's a completely ridiculous theory. I can't
it's nonsense.
I was going to say, like, take like the Georgia 06 special in 2017.
Yeah.
Like, Georgia Republicans wouldn't just happen to add in another 100,000 people for Forsyth County or something.
Oh, why has no one thought of this? Unbelievable. Like, never lose another special.
Wait a second. You're telling me we could have eliminated all those parts of Allegheny that Rick Saccone lost?
Find out how to rig elections with this
just
one
thrown in
easy
a bunch
trick.
of people from like Westmoreland, from like outer Westmoreland County to vote for him. My God.
I may have to write an article on this. Yeah. I may have to write an article on this with the title "How to Rig an Election with This One Easy Trick," because that's literally what you could do if this thing is illegal. If
lawyers hate him. Lawyers hate him.
Election lawyers hate him. Find out how he rigged this election.
Mark Goliath hates this trick. Find out how Republicans can win elections forever.
Why the Equal Protection Clause is an ink blot by Eric Cunningham.
No, it's ridiculous.
It's beyond absurd. It was a farce, to put it lightly. This election happened to begin with, and I'm not sure why nobody sued, because this is clearly illegal. So this race happened under the new lines, where it's Trump plus 11 as opposed to Trump plus 19. Mm-hmm. So let's get into why did this happen. So let's note one thing real quick, is that scandal-ridden incumbents, when they resign, their party tends to do worse in every special election. Ever, pretty much. This is a constant. Usually it's about 10 points. It's a pretty significant margin.
That's what the numbers that were shared with us on Twitter from Noah Rudnick was that on average it's about a 10-point. There are differences, but on average it's about if you're no matter what the seat, if your incumbent resigned because he was forced out due to criminal conviction and or scandal, usually your party does about 10 points worse in the seat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's one factor here. Another factor is these confusing new lines could genuinely have convinced people who were able to vote that they could not vote. I've read that go around. That actually seems pretty reasonable. Sounds kind of voter suppression-y, for being honest. But again, this is never going to be looked at. So does it matter? No, but how much do we think Dobbs factored into this? As far as I can tell, the election day votes weren't that different from before. Maybe I'm not looking into this enough, but it seemed like there's just I think there's a hope from some people on Twitter that this is an example of how 2022 isn't going to be that bad. And I don't want people to get their hopes up, because I could point to a number of special elections that happened before. And then Mike Garcia in 2020, he won that special election. Biden won that district considerably. Was it the sign of a pretending red wave? No.
No, it was a sign that Chrissy Smith is a bad candidate and remains one.
Yeah, but I want to throw this around because I just think this is interesting to talk about. Because again, we've not seen a huge bump in the polls as far as I can tell. Just blaming it on Dobbs in particular seems a little bit odd to me.
Well, we have seen a small bump in the polls.
Mm-hmm. Depends on the poll.
We've seen a lot of polls shift about 3 points-ish, which not huge, but that's something. I don't know. Does anyone want to take that?
Here's what I'd say. I think it would be very, very unfair to totally throw away the Dobbs equation in this. I think that's totally unfair, because it's fair to say that this special happened right at what could be described as the peak anger point for it, because it was seriously, it was a day, the election day vote was seriously a day after it became official. And it's not totally implausible that there were people who did not hear about the special election, and then activists in the area were like, hey, there's a special election in this seat. Right after the Dobbs thing, go out and vote and, be angry and, try and turn this seat. And I think that it's totally undeniable that definitely could. I think it's undeniable that could have at least played a part in the election day turnout for Democrats in the seat. I think that is an undeniable fact that played a part. However, we have seen this happen before in these types of midterms, is that especially with things like court cases and the general aspect of the American media, is that these things have dips and flows. And the fact is that we, like I said, we are kind of at like the peak anger point. We have people protesting. We have people protesting everywhere in the first half of the week. There were watches in big cities about potential rioting aspects, and we're already seeing that aspect of it kind of start to dip down a little bit. So, I can't say that the Dobbs factor, there's nothing to say in that. No, that clearly I think had at least some type of impact. I don't think we'll ever know numerically or data point wise what that impact was, but clearly I think that had some sort of impact. However, I think you can't overturn the fact that people, they may not have known what type of scandal it was, but they certainly saw on their local news or online that Fortenberry resigns because of scandal. That, as Eric mentioned, in data points has never been shown to help at all in special elections, and usually causes, even in safe seats, for the incumbent party to underperform. And then I think number two is that I don't really think, that is very helpful in anything right now, is that Mike Flood, I don't think really took this very seriously. He put a lot of campaign stuff into like his own radio firm, I believe, which is also, again, questionable campaign finance ethics, but we're going to oversight that today. And so I think I know Kraz, I'm sure, has something to say about this, but I think that's kind of my general reasoning. Dobbs peak at it. Certainly something that could have driven election day turnout. I don't think we're going to see that same peak in November when we forget we still have what, four months until election day. Basically, we still have 4 months.
God, we're 4 months away from November.
We have a hell of a lot of things that could happen before then, and that could bring this back up, or that could totally push this down the gutter, and gas prices could be $5 everywhere still in November, and everyone's bad, and everyone's mad about that. So, understandably so. So, that's kind of my thoughts. So I'm going to throw this to Kraz here and hear what he has to say, because he's probably going to sound a little bit more concise than I do.
Yeah. Well, I think, I have a few thoughts on this. I don't think it's impossible that Dobbs, impacted this race in some way, right? Like you said, we're at peak anger right now. This has been all over the news. But at the same time, like, I'm always skeptical of the impact of court cases on, or just the Supreme Court in general, on election results. I wrote an article back in 2020 about why I've always been skeptical of the hypothesis that Kavanaugh helped Republicans in 2018. I was skeptical of the hypothesis Amy Coney Barrett and that fight, even though it wasn't really that much of a fight, hurt or helped Republicans in 2020. And for similar reasons, I just don't think that court cases specifically are going to help Democrats that much in 2022. I think, especially given that Biden seems not unwilling, but he seems to be leaning against running against the court explicitly. Like, one thing you do not hear from Democrats or Biden or anyone is, the GOP loses at the ballot box, they go to activist judges. Or when they can't get your vote, they get the votes of 5 lawyers, right? I think those kinds of lines that would directly attack the court as being like, here's a GOP activist court, and like, that's bad, and you should vote for us because of it. Like, that kind of rhetoric has not emerged from Democrats. And because that kind of rhetoric hasn't emerged, I'm kind of skeptical that like voters are going to be like, I don't like what the court did, so like, I'm going to go vote for Democrats, because I think that mental connection isn't being made for them in the campaign material. And I also think I also just think generally people are kind of inconsistent on this. Like, I think that if your thesis is like, oh, Brett Kavanaugh helped Republicans so much in 2018 because they were mad about the court, Republicans care about the court, etc. Then you would probably also have to think that Dobbs is going to help Democrats because this is a huge deal to Democrats. So I think there's some inconsistency there in what people are saying, but I don't think that it's going to have a huge impact. And I also think the Democrats more generally haven't really centered abortion as a central campaign issue. Maybe that'll change.
Yeah. They're still focusing on Build Back Better and the voting rights bill because those are the two most important things facing.
Well, and there's some discussion about let's have a filibuster carve out for reproductive rights. I want to be clear, this is a totally unserious proposal, and I don't know why this is the thing that Democrats are trying to sell right now.
It's the best we're gonna get out of Joe.
But there's just no what's I guess what's weird to me about it and what I've seen from Democrats since the Dobbs decision is the court in a way is the perfect foil. It's the perfect enemy because it can't run ads to defend itself. Justices sometimes do speeches where they defend themselves and defend the court, but it's not that common. And so
and the media won't report on those.
Right. And the media doesn't report on those that much. And it's funny to me because it's the court can't run ads to defend itself. And the problem when you're running in a midterm is you as the president are a distinct person with all of your flaws, and your opposition is necessarily a diffuse group that can be everything to everyone all at once, right? That was Trump's problem in 2018. That's Biden's problem right now in 2022. Mm-hmm. The Beltway insider think that actually the problem is this discrete political issue, and if we just fix that we'll be fine is so weird to me. They're wildly missing the underlying fundamental reason why Biden is going to lose this midterm.
The reason Biden's going to lose this midterm is because he hasn't sold voters on anything. It's like you were just saying, what is the Democrats' message on abortion? What are they going to do if you vote for them?
Their message is give us money.
Give us money. Give us money. Wait, did you see someone tweeted this?
No,
Nancy Pelosi's latest fundraising email was
yeah.
I'm not shitting you. It was this is a catastrophe. If we don't meet our deadline, it will be the biggest defeat for women's reproductive rights in recent memory. Imagine sending that to a Democratic list where you're saying with a straight face as the Speaker of the House, give me money, or what? Biggest defeat? I feel like you're kind of missing the elephant in the room there.
Yeah. The biggest defeat is not Roe v. Wade getting overturned. It's Nancy Pelosi making $999 instead of $100,000. No, I mean, what are they going to do? They haven't said. This filibuster carve out. Look, it's not good. It's not a good proposal. It is better than I expected from Biden, but it's still not good. I don't understand. I do understand, but I don't understand why they're not running against the court.
So I think the other thing you have to understand is that I don't think the pro-choice movement has never dealt with the reality of having to run a movement in an America where abortion is illegal in a lot of different states, and you have to gradually chip away at those restrictions bit by bit.
Learn from the legalized weed movement.
That's what I've been saying. Yeah.
Here's the fundamental problem: is that over the last 50 years, so Roe v. Wade happened, and usually with landmark Supreme Court cases, that's the end of it. It happens. The result, for better or worse, goes into public record, and it kind of goes away. Now, recently, that's been the opposite case. There's still Democrats yelling about Citizens United, not really about Heller at this point, because there's ways you can get around Heller. They've gotten kind of clever, the same way Republicans did about Roe v. Wade, but they assumed that Roe v. Wade happened, that it settled law, and ignored the fact that Republicans built up a legal machine over the past 50 years, created a new legal theory over the last 50 years to get rid of Roe versus Wade. All this time, Democrats could have set up their own, legal movement. They could have set up an alternative competing thought. They could have come up with something along that line. They didn't, and now they're 50 years behind. Is there a general expectation that Democrats have this well-organized machine of potential nominees, lawyers, who hold to a consistent philosophy that is defensible in the public sphere, right? That's like Republicans, I like originalism. I'll defend originalism. Originalism is designed to be defensible because originalism often leads to decisions that, on the face of it, conservatives don't really like. Conservatives can point to whenever there's an originalist case, these justices vote against this, they vote against this, they're not voting on their personal opinion. Liberals could have done that. People like Akhil Amar are very principled judges, could have been like a way to kind of start a liberal counterweight to that. Instead, you've seen nothing over the last 50 years other than Roe gradually being chipped away at, right, with Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was hailed as a victory. Reality is a defeat. It's a pretty substantial defeat for Roe. Partial birth abortion ban being upheld, some individual restrictions, and then now Roe is gone. And I feel like the urgency is kind of gone, and I don't think people know what to do. When really, the answer is it took conservatives 50 years to get rid of the status quo. I honestly think liberals should feel fairly lucky that the conservative effort over the last 50 years was just to get rid of Roe, not to establish something new in its place. Like, they are exceptionally fortunate that was the path that the conservative legal movement took, because, imagine if they hadn't been ready for that. I don't know. It just seems to me like liberals never thought this day would come, even though they said, in court hearings for the last 50 years, every time there's been a Republican nominee, they're going to get rid of Roe. They're going to get rid of Roe. They're going to get rid of Roe. Roe imminently 5 weeks ago was about to be gotten rid of. Fundraising emails. Roe was literally gotten rid of fundraising emails. Like, were they actually ready for this?
No. Even when the decision got leaked, Eric, they were like, yeah, this is bad. Anyway, I'm gonna go on vacation. See y'all in a month.
This is something that has been my point for a while, is that this is not like some new age 1990s early 2000 religious right take. The overturning of Roe v. Wade has been in the Republican platform since the decision came down in 1970. It was a part of Gerald Ford's presidential platform. Gerald Ford. He was just a dude from it. He was just like 6 months before he ran for president. He was just some dude from Michigan.
Well, I think
happened to be GOP leader.
I think there are a few reasons why. I think that. Here's what I'll say. I think that when you read Kagan's, well, I guess it was a joint dissent, but I think Kagan probably, or maybe it was Breyer, probably wrote this part of the dissent in Dobbs. I think he's really trying to illustrate a coherent, progressive, theory of constitutional interpretation, and the theory that Breyer subscribes to, and Kagan, and what
purposivism,
but also Kagan less so, but a little bit, is the idea that really the Constitution, when it speaks in broad terms, when it speaks in definite terms, is really a collection of values, and it's up to judges to try to apply those values, right? So the Equal Protection Clause is not a set of rules about categorizations. It's a general anti-caste principle or something like that, right? You can kind of get the example. Right. There's never been a lot of enthusiasm for really pushing that forward on the left, I don't think, and I think that probably that was the section of the dissent authored by Breyer that was trying to illustrate this in some kind of coherent way. But I also think there's a bias broadly on the left, and so I think in the pro-choice movement of Roe is gone, we need something national, right? We have to kill the filibuster and codify this. We have to expand the court and codify this. There is no what?
No, I was going to go ahead. I have something to say after that.
There isn't it doesn't seem to me really there's any currency with the idea of okay, what states have abortion bans on the books? What states have citizen initiated ballot referenda? Overlap those two and get something on the ballot, right? That would make sense. And I've repeated in our group text that they should learn from the weed legalization movement, because obviously the weed legalization movement, the weed legalization movement has obviously had a goal to legalize marijuana nationwide. It's had a goal to get it taken off Schedule 1, and it's pushed for that. But the vast majority of its advocacy was small ballot measures. Okay, medical marijuana, then recreational. Let's get really small over and over again.
And it's working.
And it's worked. And like, and also I think one thing about the weed legalization movement is that it's always been comfortable making odd political bedfellows, right? So you've got like libertarians and criminal justice reformers and hippie liberals, and like you can kind of like see this kind of oddball coalition where like
fiscal conservatives to some degree as well. They're like, oh, we can make money off of this.
Oh yeah, totally, right? Like the weed legalization movement has always been super comfortable pushing at a lower level, at a state level, and making oddball political coalitions. And obviously, I don't think there are many elected Republicans who are going to like get in bed with the pro-choice movement right now, but like there has to be some willingness to be like, oh, like we'll make allies with, like Dave Portnoy put out that video, like the frat guys and like, or like the weird libertarians in the Mountain West that vote for these pro-choice ballot measures, right? Like that aren't into like the reproductive justice thing, right? Like
I'm just trying to imagine a coalition of pro-choice hippie liberals and the frat bros.
Yeah. Well, no, think about it though. It's like you mentioned, sorry, it can only somebody. You literally just mentioned it. It just slipped my mind literally just in a second. But like, we have this. I think to some degree, it's kind of 30 years too late to do an actual focused pro-choice movement in the Republican Party, right? To actually focus it that way. Ballot initiatives are doable. There's ways you can do ballot initiatives, but
yeah.
Honestly, the one I would look to is you can literally compare this to the pro-life movement. The pro-life movement was literally not just oh, we're going to get rid of Roe. I think Roe was an aspirational goal. I'm honestly surprised there's not more of a oh, we did it. Well, what now?
I was expecting that.
Yeah, it's like we like the Patrick and Sponsorship in the city. Oh, we did it. We saved the city.
Well, I think there kind of might be now, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Like, I kind of wonder how salient the issue remains going forward.
But that's the thing is even before the Roe versus Wade, what I was going to say is even before the Roe versus Wade, Republicans and pro-choice advocates on the left and the right, back at the time, were chipping away at abortion. First, they chipped away at it with parental. Well, actually, one of the big fetal homicide laws. Fetal homicide laws were a huge thing. Those have established a legal precedent that, to some degree, the murder of murder of a woman and an unborn child, the unborn child is counted as life that was murdered to some degree. You had parental notification, spousal notification, age restrictions. All these sorts of things have been broadly popular and have been supported. Then you had Casey, which came along, moved the viability threshold up. Then in the 2000s, it was not, oh, let's ban abortion. It was, oh, let's ban partial birth abortion. Because partial birth abortion is bad. And they got that done federally. They passed that federally and it was upheld. And then slowly it's been, oh, we're going to do 15 weeks. We're going to do 6 weeks. Like they've come up with these like defensible thresholds where they not necessarily defensible, but like that's not an outright ban that they could defend publicly. It's the same thing the marijuana people have done. You have your medical marijuana, you have the hemp, you have the CBD oil, like all these individual things have added up. All that obviously goes out the door if weed is legalized, right? All that sort of active advocacy goes away. But in the median, before that, they've been focusing on all this other stuff. Pro-choice advocates have basically just been kind of like, we got to defend Roe, and we got to defend Roe, and like that's just like there's only so much you can do with that threshold, right? I mean, you can defend Roe, but like, are they actively pushing for like additional things? Not really. I just feel like they kind of got caught flat-footed for not in the last 50 years necessarily, but at least recently, it's been very flat-footed, the response to this. And
yeah,
the court very clearly taking this, like, we're going to be doing this. I mean, it's been pretty obvious for about 7 months now that this is where the court was headed. You had 7 months to plan something. You had 5 weeks to plan something. You didn't even have a day of rage. There was not even a day of rage.
Like, no, and it's not like we on the left are unreasonable and want to our politicians and demand that they succeed. Just try.
Yeah, literally just try.
I will say, in defense of like Planned Parenthood, they actually did have kind of a plan. I don't know. I think maybe Adam sent this to me, where like the day after Dobbs came down, they announced they were opening like, I think it was like 10 new clinics on the New Mexico border. And it was like the border with Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma. Like it was like all like these little border towns.
And that's good.
So they clearly had a plan of like, oh, like abortion is going to be banned in Arizona, Texas, Oklahoma. Like we'll open a bunch of clinics on the border towns there so people can just drive over, which obviously you should have that contingency plan. Like that's a pretty basic contingency plan. But no one else seemed to have a contingency plan.
Yeah. Like we were talking about it last time. three things Democrats could do tomorrow to start moving the needle. Bill put forward, three individual bills put forward for an allowance for abortions federally for rape, incest, life of the mother. If you really wanted to put them forward, and I think you could reasonably put forward a bill to codify birth control access, a bill to codify gay marriage, I think those are both fine. Make Republicans take the unpopular position, as we're seeing with all of the Michigan gubernatorial nominees. There is still some resistance to the idea of gay marriage, so put that on record too. It's legally dubious, I know, but Elizabeth Warren's idea for abortion clinics, at least try it. Give it a shot. Let the court strike it down if that's what the court's going to do.
The problem is you run into, with the federal lands thing, you run into the tribes, which have, I don't want to say they're pro-life or pro-choice. They have their own specific, stances on the federal involvement into their lands. And you don't want to alienate Native, if you don't want to alienate the Native American vote ahead of, New Mexico election. That's a pretty bad idea.
Certainly, and you'd have to talk to all of the different tribes and ask what they want to do. But I'm sure there are some tribes who would go along with it. I'm sure there are a lot who wouldn't. But give it a shot. See what happens. Just try something.
The problem is, though, it's the trying. That's the hard part.
But Eric, you sent a video this morning that I saw when I woke up about a really angry guy talking about all the fundraising emails, and you tagged me in it, and it's like, yeah, that's me. I don't why is this happening? Is the best they can do fundraising emails? Is that really the best we've got as a party?
Well, it's that and organizing. Those are the two magical tools that ensure you'll never lose an election, is you just organize harder and raise more money, and you won the election.
Those are good ways to win elections, but what do you do once you've won the elections?
You do nothing.
I know we were kind of laughing about it before we went on air, but the J.B. Pritzker fandom right now seems to literally only exist because J.B. Pritzker did what he ran on, which should not be a high bar.
No, not particularly.
No, shouldn't be a high bar at all. But I guess it is. I don't know if you guys saw. Did you see the ad that the pro-choice movement is running in Kansas ahead of the ballot measure?
Yeah.
No, actually, I forgot to talk about the ballot measure. I'm interested in that one, but I haven't seen the ad.
The ad doesn't even mention abortion. It's literally just vote no on this to protect your individual liberty. That's a good ad.
It's a very good ad.
The interesting thing, though,
very good ad.
Is both Laura Kelly and her Republican opponent have been pretty silent on this whole abortion thing until the referendum happens. They have not said a lot about this ruling. Surprisingly, they're all waiting to see how the referendum goes down, because obviously, if it's a big win for, because it's basically the referendum is on whether or not there's a right to an abortion in the Kansas Constitution. If there's not, if voters say no, you're Laura Kelly, you can adjust to that. Like, I'm personally pro-choice, but I don't want to, fund abortion. They're like, you come up with something, right? On the other hand, if you're the Republican there and they support this, maybe you don't run on banning all abortions, right? I mean, that's the.
Or if you're Mark Brnovich, you decide I'm going to pivot to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think also I think that's probably a smart ad, because when you look at where abortion referendums, pro-life referendums, underperform the GOP the most, a lot of times you're looking at the Mountain West, especially, and a lot of that's the kind of weird overlap. Got to be one of the most underrepresented demographics in elite American political discourse. The weird overlap between I like living in the Mountain West and own guns, and abortions and infringement on individual liberty, this weird mesh overlap.
It's a libertarianist. It's the West is literally where the Barry Goldwater strand of conservatism came from. I would argue the Barry Goldwater strand of conservatism is this individual liberty focused strand, is what evolved into the current Republican Party. Where did that come from? It came from Arizona. It came from the Mountain West. Where did Ronald Reagan come from? California. That's not the Mountain West, but there is a very specific strand of individualist conservatism that still exists in California and these areas. That's definitely a thing. That's continued to that's where it's all come from. It's just there's been additional movement into the party, and and a lot of those voters, frankly, are Democrats now or independents. But still, like there's a group of people there that are willing to vote for against abortion restrictions. For that matter, South Dakota almost voted against the gay marriage referendum, I'm pretty sure, in like 2006. Like it was not very strong. It was not a very strong vote against that. Arizona, for that matter, voted down an attempt to ban gay marriage. Before they did, it was a different bill. But like these areas have shown a little bit more of a willingness to moderate on this sort of stuff. So I would be interested to see that. And a lot of them do have open ballot initiatives. States like, North Carolina don't, Georgia, Texas, these states don't have that sort of access, but states in the Mountain West, they certainly do. And if you can't get a constitutional right to an abortion, you could maybe get in, first trimester into law. You could get, other things like, life of the mother exception, rape, incest, all that sort of stuff. You could at least throw that in there through referendums. And that could at least be a way to progress popular vote on that matter.
Yeah. I mean, the whole point is you need, as a party, to present to voters what you're going to do with power if you get it. That's the only way you're going to get their votes. If you can't present a theory, don't be surprised if you lose on the issue, even if the vast majority of voters agree with you.
Well, Democrats did have a plan going into. They did have a mission statement and a plan going into 2020, which is the Orange Man bad. He is gone now, and you're kind of seeing the weakness of just focusing specifically on that. They didn't actually have a cohesive policy plan.
You kind of hate on it though, but like Trump was like personally very obnoxious.
Yeah,
and, like,
it was a very good strategy.
It was a very good strategy, but it didn't have a coherent. Like they didn't know what to do once they took over. Like, is this like a progressive? We're going to take over and be progressives. Like the people want this progressive government, or the people just want like normal person instead of mean tweets. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, Democrats didn't have a cohesive theory, and it's coming back to bite them. And the lack of urgency on an issue that Democrats pounded on for literal decades is both surprising and not at all surprising.
I would argue that structural. Again, Democrats never built up this counterweight. Breyer, he tried to make purposivism. He tried to make this concept of active liberty a thing. I would say personally, it's kind of hard to argue against activist judges when your presupposition is that the First Amendment has to be interpreted, or the Constitution is just a broad set of principles, and we got to interpret them. The concept of liberty, you can defend that, but what the court did is not that unusual in terms of like defending a concept of liberty or popular sovereignty. Like, if I were the left, I would be developing a legal theory that's based around autonomous individual rights generally, focus heavily on that, make that defensible for Roe and defensible for other things, and then find a way to build a muscular government into that. But it's a bit of a struggle. I mean, you have to be willing to accept some losses. The right has been willing to accept originalism and textualism, which have resulted in some rulings they very much dislike, because on a lot of the things that conservatives really like, abortion, guns, all this other stuff, originalism suits their policy agenda pretty well. It's generally in line with smaller regulatory state, limited federal government powers, federalism, autonomy, like all that sort of stuff that conservative likes. Originalism works for that. I think liberals need to find a defensible legal philosophy, build around it, and then kind of do a counterweight to that. And it's going to be a work. I mean, right now, liberals aren't in too much different of a spot than conservatives were around the time of Roe. That was what, a 7-2 ruling. There weren't a whole lot of actual conservatives on the court. Democrats are in that position. They're actually going to need to build up their court system to take the court back whenever they, have future systems of power. I don't know. I'm kind of speculating here, but I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward, at least.
Yeah, no, it is. And to that point, did we want to talk about the deal Biden is making?
We can do that real quick before we close off.
Yeah, because I'm curious what y'all think. I'm really confused why he's making this deal.
It's a funny deal. This is why Mitch McConnell is the leader, because Mitch McConnell does smart things like this. God bless nuclear cocaine, man.
Well, they do. I mean, it's not that unusual to get blue slip approval from district court judges still. I mean, I get the focus on it because apparently this lawyer is like pro-life, but like, I'm just going to be really honest right now. Like, under Dobbs, abortion restrictions are reviewed for rational basis, which means the government always wins. And Republicans in Kentucky have a veto-proof majority. So like people who are like Kentucky's going to be the center of litigation. Like we can't have a judge like this. It's like, no, like it doesn't matter who you have there because like it's for abortion, at least, like it's kind of irrelevant. Like it's going to be a state with a lot of abortion restrictions that are all going to pass rational basis. And if there is one that's kind of like on the edge, like, yeah, you'll lose with him, but it's meaningless. You'll just appeal to the Sixth Circuit. So like, I don't,
Sure.
yeah.
I don't.
On the other hand, it looks like
anything.
this.
Yes. No, that's what I was going to say. And also, does nobody in the White House understand optics? This is not a deal you make a week after Roe v. Wade gets overturned. Do they not have a communications director?
The optics part of it is more fair. Like, I think if I were Biden and I wanted to make this deal, I'd say like, look, we'll make the deal, but can we like wait a little bit to like really like put this through? Because like
we'll do this in like December.
Yeah, exactly. Like the optics are really bad, I will admit. And I don't
even in August. You could do this in August and people wouldn't care too much. It's just right
like,
now.
The deal's
it's funny how this all got leaked like a couple I guess yesterday night it was like, yeah, four days after Roe, after Dobbs happens, we're gonna make this deal that's gonna put a lifetime very like anti-abortion judge.
The worst trade deal in the history of deals, maybe ever.
Yeah, for 2 temporary appointments. Like, I'm sorry, what? You're going to sabotage your own optics for 2 appointments that aren't even going to last a lifetime, and you're going to give away
what it was originally reported, Alice, was that McConnell was just going to stop objecting to all judges ever, which made no sense. And then it later became like this, and it's like, oh, that makes a lot more sense, because Mitch McConnell's not a dumbass, and he wouldn't...
No, but I get the feeling that the White House is full of them. Because seriously, the optics on this are horrendous.
They're not good. They're not good optics. Like the rough equivalent, like I don't know. It just you got to plan better. You got to plan this. Like you got to look at your schedule. You know, Dobbs date.
Yeah.
You know, Dobbs date.
Do you have a plan? Do you have a weekly planner? Okay, on your weekly planner, don't put appoint pro-life judge anywhere near the overturn Roe v. Wade box. Those
like
two
if this had been done a week before
very
Dobbs. Yeah, again, if this had been done a week before Dobbs, would anyone have really cared? Probably not.
No. Even the week after, maybe even.
But 4 days? Like, oh my God. Y'all are really bad at your jobs. You deserve to lose.
What is it? You know, the Simpsons meme, the Republicans like our policies are objectively evil, and the Democrats are we hate life and ourselves. Like basically.
I think it was we hate winning or something like that.
No, it was we hate life and ourselves. We can't govern.
We're not. Kraz and I aren't part of an organized political party. We're Democrats.
And then the Republican one was like, "We're just plain evil, like whatever." So that's a very good one because it was from the '90s, and like somehow it's held up very well for.
It's held up remarkably.
Again, I feel like the Biden administration could benefit from having like one politically connected, like 29-ish-year-old person on their staff just to kind of look at the optics and be like, just the optics manager, right? Just like,
well, no. The problem is it's too siloed, right? Like they have too many 29-year-old optics managers right now, and like so their messaging overall kind of sucks. Which is why, like, their one message on abortion is like kill the filibuster and like codify. It's just like they don't really have a message.
But that's
right?
not the White House's message.
No, but
at least then it would be a cohesive vision.
No,
the White House's message is the White House's message is to go to Europe and say abortion ban is bad,
Yeah, like I think
Justin Trudeau and Boris Johnson had a more cohesive message against Roe v. Wade than Joe Biden did.
What you have to understand about the way judicial nominations work too is like they're much more siloed off from the rest of the administration. So like they're not like, I don't know how to describe it. Like the people running the judicial nominations. Yeah, but he doesn't actually like know these people. Like
that's a good point.
He should get a little cue card.
The thing is that like the people who do the judicial nominations are just like very separate and distinct from the rest of the administration. Like a lot of times it's high-powered lawyers who have come back to work in government for the administration, experienced attorneys.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Kraz is breaking up, so.
We've had some technical difficulties on your side here, Kraz. If anything, I think that might be a sign because we are going over the hour time limit that we set for ourselves here.
Yeah.
Maybe. Sorry, we were having another good discussion.
Oh no, actually, I'm okay with like just at least maybe to 1:15. But like, I get that. On the other hand, like I think it would benefit from like someone at least looking at all of this and deciding the optics. I know the Trump administration had no optics management. The optics were awful. There was no management. Everyone there was bad. Half the press secretaries were horrendous. Several of the government employees have been testifying. That's very bad. That's a very bad situation. But like in a vacuum, the Biden one is a lot worse than the Obama White. I feel like the Obama White House was a lot more cohesive with their messaging, their planning, The
Obama administration wouldn't have done this.
Yeah. I feel like they had a better grasp of when to time things and when not, right? Like they weren't timing their bipartisan stuff around this, right? I mean, there is a time for you to have that, blue chip nomination. There's a time for you to talk about your bipartisan negotiations on the budget. It's not right after a Supreme Court decision that alienated a substantial chunk of the Democratic constituency and has angered them to a great degree.
Yeah, I think my proposal, you don't need a bunch of optics managers. You need one in every department who report to one who reports to the executive, who reports to Biden. Biden only needs one optics manager, but every department needs one because every department right now seems to be doing something weird that could be resolved if there were one person there to go, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, like a good example, the gas tax messaging, the gas messaging. The messaging you should not be doing is going on television and saying the bad gas prices will continue until Ukraine has been liberated. That's really not a good message because one, like that's really bad. That's just objectively unacceptable to a lot of American voters. Two, it leaves you vulnerable for if Ukraine does liberate itself and the gas prices don't go substantially down to where they were, you're kind of stuck.
Here's
right?
What the gas messaging should be. Shh. Quiet. Shh. Don't say anything until after the midterms. Sure.
I don't know. Like I think we're kind of spinning around here a little bit, but I think we're all in agreement that this is bad optics at minimum.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Regardless of the merits of the nomination, optics bad. Reconsider your.
I think Kraz's computer has died. I think it's time to go.
Yep, rest in peace.
Goodbye, Kraz.
We need to play taps for his computer.
Can we play taps?
No.
Please.
No. Please. We're saving that for election nights. Come on.
All right, and so I don't believe we have an election night this month, right? We don't have anything.
We do not go again until August 2nd.
We're not doing Maryland?
No, that's one state. We're not doing one state.
Maryland is boring.
I mean, I agree Maryland is boring, but
Maryland shouldn't be a state.
If we don't do one state nights, we don't do one unless it's a big one like Texas.
Yeah, Maryland shouldn't be a state. I will strongly position Maryland should be
combined with we gotta end now. We're not gonna go into another one like that.
Are we not merging Virginia, West Virginia, and Washington, D.C.?
No, it's in Kentucky. And they create the Empire of Virginia again. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Appreciate your support. Follow us all. The names below. Kraz obviously is not here, but you can follow him at Kraz Granitz. You can find all of us on Twitter pretty easily, so don't worry about that. Elections-daily.com, elections_daily on Twitter. Appreciate your support in all those areas. Be sure to subscribe, like if you liked our stuff, retweet, share with all your friends wherever you're watching this. We'll see you back here next week for Elections Weekly. Until then, have a great night, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.